A little bit about some of the other lectures. And of course, look, these lectures will help, but you want to use this with the textbook, okay? And I know textbooks can be very dry. And so you don't sit there, a lot of people don't understand how to use a textbook. You don't have to sit there and read every single thing, okay? Because I know how it is. You're going to read one page and it's going to be okay. You read another page and it'll be okay. And then you'll read another page and you start thinking about something else. And, you don't get a lot out of it that way. You sort of have to actively read. You go in there and use these lectures to support what you read in the text and use the text to help you support what you hear and what you see here in the lectures. Okay. Now, as a result of the Industrial Revolution, okay, farmers were going to have, had a very difficult time, and it was the farmers that really kind of started the populist movement. And we're going to talk more about the populist movement, but what you have to remember about the populist movement more than anything else is that it led to the progressive movement. And the progressive movement was, I guess, much more effective than the populist movement in actually getting things done. Now, look, it depends on how you look at all this. I mean, some people um, can say, well, the populist movement and the progressive movement was all basically the same thing. And then, you wouldn't really be far off from that. And that's what's, sometimes what's difficult about like multiple choice test is they will not make that distinction sometimes, and there's a lot of examples of that. It's like, well, it kind of depends on how you look at it. Anyway, um, so why were the farmers having a hard time? Well, one of the reasons is because there was a glut in the market, and I'm not an economist. I've taken a few economic courses when I was in college. I actually did pretty well because I was in love with this girl that was in the class, and I really wanted to impress her by making an A, and I did. But we went out once and it didn't work out. She didn't like me. Anyway, but we don't have to go there. Okay, so what is a glut in the market? Okay, so this is some basic economics, and I don't really have to explain it that much to you. But when we talk about a glut, you're talking about an oversupply of whatever. Okay, so let's say it's grain. As a result of the Industrial Revolution, as a result of new technologies in farming, it became easier to grow grain or other farm products. And so as a result, there was, as I said, an oversupply. Okay, so if you have an oversupply or a glut in anything, what happens to the prices? All right, the prices go down. And that's exactly what happened. However, the cost of farming for many people in the West, and at this time we're talking about more like the Midwest, okay, not California, all right, but say from Ohio all the way into even Nebraska to some, to a large extent to Kansas in that area. So this is all in the late, just to kind of give you a time frame here, late 1800s, and so the price or the cost of farming kept going up, even though farm products kept going down. So that was one problem. Another problem was the banks would charge them very high interest rates. And so, why would they do this? Well, in order to farm, right, you had to get loans, all right? And if you had to get loans, all right, then the demand for loans was high. And so if the demand, so you could say that the cost of the loan which was the interest rate, would go up. Okay, so you had very, sometimes maybe, 35, 30, 35, even up to 40% interest rates. Okay, it's very high interest rates. Another problem that farmers were having was what they call uh, long haul, short haul abuse from the railroads. Okay, in order to compete, these railroads would charge very little for long hauls because they would have other companies that they would have to compete with. So they would go very, very low in terms of their price. That's competition. But this railroad company may just have one line that would kind of go out there in the country, like if maybe way out there in Starks or somewhere like that, for example. And there would be no other railroad lines that would go out there. And so the farmer had no choice but to use this railroad line, all right, to ship his goods here so it could go to places like New York. Okay? And so here it would be the price would be very, very high. Okay? So these are just some of the problems that farmers were having. And so it was the farmers in many ways that kind of started what we call the populist movement. It kind of started with what we call the Grange movement. The Grange is just an old word meaning a farmer or granary. You can also, in French, there's an old word meaning the same thing, but we say in South Louisiana, we say granger. All right. So the Grange movement. And it was founded by Oliver H. Kelly. I always want to put an E right there for some reason when I write his name. Anyway, it acquired 1.5 million members before 1873. Or I'm sorry, after. After 1873. And one of the reasons that it occurred at this time was because in 1873 they had what we called, or what people called back then, a panic, the Panic of 1873. Basically, what happened to the economy is it would go through this pretty volatile boom, then bust cycle. Things would go well, things would go down. We've kind of experienced that to some extent. I mean, about well, shoot, 6, 7 years ago, we were kind of in maybe here, and then we went down, and hopefully it looks like maybe unemployment has gone down a little bit, so maybe we're going up, but we'll just have to see. Okay, and so this is something that would every 20, 30 years you would have a bust. Okay, and so they called it a panic instead of a depression because people would panic and run to the bank, all right, to get their money out because the bank was not, your money was not insured like it is today by the FDIC. So at first the organization was more social and it was more social and educational in nature, um, and it mainly was designed to alleviate, to kind of get rid of um, a problem that the farmers had, which was isolation. And what I mean by that, of course, is that it was in order for these guys to do anything, they had to get together, and farmers tended to be very isolated on the frontier. Okay, so overall, it was not managed very well. All right, and And for the most part, they had created these co-ops, but it really just didn't last because of poor management. Eventually, farmers' alliances were formed, and it actually became kind of known just as the Farmers Alliance, singular. Um, and they included some things, in terms of what they wanted. And this was just a lot of different farmers organizations that came together to form the Farmers Alliance. And like I said, sometimes you will see it with an S, the Farmers Alliances. That's fine, either one's fine. And these are some of the things that they wanted. All right, they wanted to use what was known as bimetallism, or the gold and silver. Okay, now the reason that they wanted this was because it would create a bit of inflation. Now, at that time, gold, all right, backed up the currency. So for every $1, you had like a dollar's worth of gold. Okay, and that we no longer use the gold standard. In fact, if you listen to people like Ron Paul, he says that we should go back to the gold standard because what he says is that, well, our what stops the government or anybody else from using inflationary tactics. Okay, and what I mean by that, let's see if I can explain it, is that if back then when they used, or when the farmers wanted gold and silver, what this would allow is for them to print more money, because by using silver there was more silver, and then they could print more money. Now, who does that help? Well, let's say if you are in debt, like most farmers with those high interest rates. If you were in debt, all right, and you had high interest rates, all right, and it was at a fixed rate, then let's say you owed $50,000, and then there was just more money that came into the system, all right, then all of a sudden that $50,000 the next year that you sell your farm products is really not that bad, and it's a little bit easier to pay off. Now, the banks, of course, were totally against this. All right, they were like, no way. Okay, so now what are some other things that the farmers alliances wanted? All right, they wanted what we call a protective tariff. And we talk about a protective tariff, exactly what do we mean? Okay, well, that means that if you have some type of product that you want to sell, all right, and in order to produce that product, it costs you $100. Now, let's say there's another country, it could be China, not back then, all right, but let's just say, right now that would be plausible, more than plausible. It could be, any other country. And let's say that they could produce a product, ship it, and sell it to the United States for $10. So what they're going to do is they're going to sell it for, say, $70, and they're going to make a $60 profit. The thing is, it costs you $100 to produce your product, so you might be able to sell it, say, for, if you want the same profit, for $160. So, is there any possible way you can compete with these guys in this situation? And let's say, sure, your product may be better quality, but not necessarily that much. Okay? Well, a protective tariff, what it would do is that say every time China would send that product over here, that same product, all right, they would have to pay, and if they wanted to, in order to, the cost of selling that in the United States, it would cost them $100. So then, all right, in a way it'd be $160. I mean, I'm sorry, $110. If they wanted to make the same amount of profit, all right, it would be 170, and then you could sell your product for 160. And remember, yours is a little bit better product, okay? So maybe if it's produce, or maybe if it's crawfish or whatever, it may be fresher. Who knows? Okay, so that is a protective tariff. You're protecting your industries. Okay, why don't people do that? Well, you have to remember, and of course, well, I shouldn't say why do people do that or not do that. I mean, there's times in our history where we have done that, and other times that we haven't. And it's my opinion that sometimes it could be good and sometimes it can be bad. All right. In the past, they wanted to do that on Japanese trucks. When I was in high school, all right, a Toyota truck cost about $6,000. Just a basic, Toyota truck. And some people were like, man, they can't, we can't compete with um, some of the American trucks is $12,000. So some people were saying, let's put a $7,000 protective tariff. They didn't do this, but some people said that they should. Now, what's the disadvantage of this? Well, the disadvantage is that as a consumer, as somebody that wants to buy a vehicle, when you buy, let's say I buy to buy a Toyota truck for $6,000, I am an American. So that's, I'm saving $6,000 that I can spend on other businesses in America. Secondly, this product, the price may go down in order to compete. All right, or the quality of the product will go up as demand for these vehicles, all right, increase. Their prices are going to go up. So things, people argue the market, all right, will create this equilibrium if left alone. Okay, this is sometimes called the invisible hand of the market. If you leave the market, if you leave the economy completely alone, call this laissez-faire economics. All right, now there's really nowhere where they do this completely. Okay, now it's just a matter of degree, and a lot of political debate that you hear is really on how much we should allow the market to just go by itself without any type of government intervention. And so people get all huffy about it, but really it's just a matter of degree. If the government gets a little bit involved, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're becoming communist or anything like that. Some people get a little bit carried away with that, in my opinion. But you probably kind of need both sides, to be honest. I mean, if the government gets too involved, people argue, and it's probably true that it stifles the economy. But if the government never gets involved, you'll have these big booms and busts like we did in the 1800s, where we're probably better off kind of doing with something like this. But anyway, like I said, I'm not an economist, and I'm certainly no expert on that. Okay. What are some other things that the farmers wanted? Well, we'll talk about that in a bit in the next lecture.